Most people pick a tech job by the title, but I think that's the wrong approach because the title doesn't necessarily always tell you what you will do every day. But luckily for you, I worked out a framework based on 4 axes that will help you figure out which role is right for you, what you like, and what you're good at. So let's get started by looking at this page that I built. I will leave a link in the description to a GitHub where you can download the HTML, and probably I will also try to upload it as a website so that you can play around with it. How does it work? On the left, you have 4 axes that I talked about, and then on the right, you have a graph with like different tech jobs, and based on those like 4 axes that I mentioned, you can kind of place yourself. The 4 axes that I mentioned. The first one is, are you more interested into being user faces or deep into the systems? To help you figure this out, because maybe it's not that easy to just answer off the top of your head, here are some questions that I prepared. So do you prefer visible product impact or invisible technical leverage? Do you like building things users can see or a system they might never notice? Would you rather improve interfaces or infrastructures? 2 very different things. And then finally the last 2, do you enjoy direct feedback from users? And then does product taste matter to you? And the goal is that sort of by answering those questions in your head or out loud, doesn't really matter, you're gonna be able to move the slider and see as I move the slider, it's moving the like lighter point on the graph on this axis from user facing to systems, and this will help you kind of find, closer to which roles you could be interested in. Obviously, this is not like a fixed result. As your career progresses, maybe it will change, you will be closer to other roles, and actually that's, in my opinion, one of the cool things about being a software engineer in general, is that there's so many different domains and you will never run out of like new things to learn. For instance, if I was answering for myself, I would say pretty balanced. I like some user-facing stuff because when I worked with users, it's always been like quite interesting. But I also like, building like complex technical systems, because I find in my experience that at least being close to the systems usually means that you work very closely to very complex and like, the deep like engineering stuff. Whereas user-facing usually means a bit more like UI, UX, not necessarily only that, because obviously in data, for instance, as a data engineer, I can have very user-facing, for instance, with like dashboards, but at least it really means the users is more where the input of your work comes from, compared to systems. Usually you're a bit more responsible actually of the input, because your technical knowledge is gonna be what decides which system to pick. Okay, then next is another interesting angle, which is creative versus structured. Obviously you can be a little bit of both, that's why there's a middle point in the graph, but still this is a pretty, I would say, important one. And here are some questions for you. Do you prefer open-ended choices or more precise rules and correctness? Do you like solving problems with taste or with very strict logic? Are you more comfortable with iteration or with specification? Would you rather design or standardize? Do you enjoy room for ambiguity? So for instance, in my case, I am much more on the structured side. As you can see, I have a YouTube channel, so I like creativity, but in my technical work, I like structure. I need precise rules. I need to go in with a plan, if that makes sense, and kind of, make sure things are sturdy. To me, being structured helps make things technical things that I build feel sturdy and reliable, and give me more confidence in my work when I try to be structured than when I try to be creative. Fully personal answer, but yeah, with those questions that will kind of help you. As you can see, it doesn't move as much the point on the axis, because obviously I couldn't do a 4D axis, but so that's why also this graph on the left is not fully complete. And there's also this axis strength, where you see the points are gonna move around as I move my answers around, and I think this is a bit more relevant. The graph is just to have a visual aid. And then let's go into reactive versus deep work. Reactive is sort of in line with the user facing aspect, but it's gonna be do you like to work on short sprints, things that need to be fixed now, kind of a sense of urgency in your work? Is it something nice for you? Or would you rather have much longer sprints and building big things sort of at once? Not obviously you're not going to ship everything into one try, but just, something where you're like kind of like in your zone, building your thing and not like constantly making changes. So for that, let's look at the questions, even though I kind of already gave you some questions. Do you prefer live operational urgency or long uninterrupted focus? Just what I was talking about. Do you like switching quickly between issues? Would you rather respond to problems or build calmly? Does production pressure energize you? And do you enjoy fast moving day? In my case, I would put it all the way over, which is kind of a bit of an exaggeration, but I do like quick things and like quick fixes. For instance, those are like some of my favorite days at work is we have like one day a month where we only work on like a list of small bugs and quick fixes, and those are usually my favorite days at work because I like this like immediate reward of doing my job the right way and implementing it fast and feeling like, at least to me, that's how I feel progress. I know for some people it's the complete opposite. They hate doing like quick fixes because sometimes it can feel a bit more rushed and a bit less like thought out, and it can cause more mistake, but sometimes you also just need to get things moving. Whereas if they feel like if they have the time for deep work, it really allows them to build something they're confident in. So to each their own, and it's not just about what you like but also what you're good at, because for instance for me deep work is not the easiest of things to do, and if you give me like 3 weeks to fix a problem, I will probably wait until the last 3 days to fix it. So if you give me a problem every 3 days, I will fix all of those problems. So it's also what you like but also actual strengths of yours. And then let's go to the last axis, build new versus reliability. This one is a bit less explicit, I would say, but let's look at some of the questions. So do you prefer shipping new things or keeping systems healthy? Do you like launching features more than maintaining stability? Would you rather optimize something existing or create something new? Do you enjoy ownership of reliability? And do you prefer long-term robustness over novelty? Same, obviously, on that category, also because I worked a lot in startups and in small teams. For me personally, that's where I thrive. I like to build new. I'm very happy that there are some people that feel the opposite, because again, that's how things work, is that because we have so many people that have different strengths along those 4 axes that, things actually get moving and companies work out. You need that like diversity in a team to work, because none of those is like better than the other. It's really just like which one are you and which one are you better at, and you need both. But yeah, what's interesting is then that I did get the data analyst profile, which interesting that I am a data engineer, but I would say that on paper I actually considered becoming a data analyst for a very long time, and like it's very often a question that I ask myself. It's just that honestly the roles are not that far off. First of all, based on my experience, I had data engineer roles that were actually sometimes a bit of like analyst and still offered me the things that I like, so like structured work and reactive user facing. Again, like the titles are not fixed, and that's why it's important to answer those questions, because they might also help you when you're like applying to actual jobs, to kind of look at the description and outside of the title see what you're good at and what you want to do, and if it's matching the like job posting or not. I gave some example of jobs. Obviously they're not listed all down there, but you also have like a closest groups, and so everything is like within the analyst world in my case. But for instance, if we move things around, like maybe if we sort of build like the opposite of me, you get more of like a back-end profile, which makes sense, deep work and systems, so what everything is like relying on but isn't very like visible to the user. So whatever it is in the backend can also be like APIs or things like that, as things that user don't directly interact with but are core essential parts of the company and how the product works. And they also usually require like longer times of projects. At least in my experience, I've always found that the like front end engineer, you kind of feel like they ship something new every day, because you just see the interface changes, whereas the backend sometimes it's a bit more slow, because it might be like making the system a second faster every day, or like every week. Every day would be a little fast, but like every week, which maybe you don't notice every week, but it compounds over time. So anyway, those actually what I really like about this system is kind of playing around with the axis and seeing where the different things options. So for instance, if you're kind of like right in the middle of everything, you'd be more likely to be like a QA engineer, which is kind of an interesting role in my opinion. Something that, for instance, I would say is not really for me, because it's more of a balanced type of profile than clearly I showed when I did the exercise. Again, this is not like something that you strictly have to follow, like whatever the result is isn't going to define who who you are as a person. But the goal is really that by answering, especially I feel like outside of the axes, the questions are really, really important, because forcing yourself to answer those questions and kind of figure out who you are as an engineer is really going to help you pick the right jobs and jobs that are going to actually be fulfilling for you. And I do want to conclude by saying that this grid, it's like no one is a pure type. The grid just shows dominance, not a binary at all. It's like we're all somewhere in the spectrum, and two people with the same title like can sit at completely different spots. For instance, I showed you that the result would say that I should be a data analyst, whereas I work almost like on the opposite end of this double axis grid. And I'm pretty sure I have a friend who's also a data engineer who would kind of be at the other end of the graph as I am, and yet we have the same job. So that's why this is not like something super strict that you have to follow, but it's just about knowing yourself more and making the right choices for yourself. And with that being said, I will see you next week in the next video.